by the way, that's a marvellous view of your kitchen. You've got some good books there.
Yeah, they're cooking books. I don't really read them. People bought them for me for Christmas years ago. Yeah, what can I say? If anyone wants to come round, I'll cook them something from one of these books.
I'm imagining that a racing driver doesn't get much chance to actually do luxury cooking.
I mean, I like cooking, and I eat pretty well. I'd like to think, but right now, convenience is king. So
okay.
Yeah.
So, let's get started properly. Welcome to a special kind of slightly off-piste edition of the E-Talking podcast. We're parking our usual fully electric car chat to talk to an actual proper racing driver who is currently involved in sports cars. So I'm Stuart Garlick. We've got Conrad O'Keefe from eracing.net and Sophie Barker from Formula E Zone, and we're welcoming Charlie Martin today. Hello, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much for having me on the show at such short notice. It's lovely to be speaking to you all. It's
a real privilege to speak to an actual racing driver after months of only talking about them.
Okay, well, I hope I'm not going to disappoint.
You already haven't. So, Charlie, I mean, I know Conrad and Sophie have got loads of questions for you, but maybe if we just start with you talking about, because the reason we connected was your sponsor appeal. But before we even get there, I mean, you've had a long racing career, and you are also going to talk about representation as well for transgender people. But so where would you like to start? Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us a potted history of your racing career.
Oh gosh, okay. Where do you want me to start? Well, I suppose
we can start with hill climbs if you like.
Hill climbs, yeah, is probably a good place to begin. I started hill climbing about 12 years ago. I was introduced to the sport through one of my best friends at school, Hamish. His dad raced. We used to go away with him at the weekend. He also did circuit racing, but it's a type of motorsport that's perhaps not quite so well known. Certainly by people who are outside of circuit racing and things. It essentially is a timed distance between 2 points, and I guess in many ways it was probably the oldest form of motorsport. Literally drive up a hill, hence hill climb, and see who can do that the quickest. So it's on a closed tarmac surface, and in England the hill climbs are quite short. They're quite narrow, and they tend to be completed in anything from sort of 25 to 45 seconds, depending on what kind of car you're in. And so, I kind of came across that whole motorsport, and it was a very friendly, affordable type of racing. The year I left university, I pretty much made up my mind that this is it. I want to start racing somehow. And hill climb seemed like the best place to begin, really. So I saved up that summer. I worked a job doing all kinds of things, and managed to put £1,500 aside. Bought myself a Peugeot 205, which was a bit of a half-finished project. And to be honest, at that point in my life, I was into cars and car culture. I guess Max Power and things like that had been quite big when I was growing up. And so I had a lot of passion and determination, but I didn't really know, I'll be honest, I didn't even know which way you turn a screw to tighten it or undo it. I mean, I'm quite practical, but I just didn't have that, no one had ever showed me that kind of thing. I don't have a family history of motorsport. So I just kind of started there, and it all kind of, it's all kind of gone from there, really. I raced in club level in the UK for quite a few years, progressed up to a few different cars, and then went off to race in France for 3 years, doing the French Hill Climb Championship. Now, over on the continent, hill climb is I guess a little bit more like rally, because the courses are actually made up of closed public roads, quite often the road between two villages. And they can be in, through most of Europe, they can be up to like 6 or 7 kilometres long. And you really need to learn the course in detail. You don't have a co-driver with you, regardless of what type of car you're in. So you have to have a very quick memory to recall exactly, every single turn in, every braking point. And hill climb, we use things, anything, a tree, a bit of paint on a railing. It's a very good test of your memory skills. And I did that in a Formula Renault and then a prototype, and it was fantastic. It was a real adventure. I went off into that entirely on my own in a self-built motorhome come race truck, and I was still living in the UK at the time, so I was leaving it in long stay car parking at an airport, flying backwards and forwards and driving all over France, and driving at breakneck speeds on French B roads in a single seater, which was quite an adventure.
Well, I mean, I used to read about hill climbs in Autosport, and I used to read about people like Andy Prio, actually, who of course has gone on to be something rather special in touring cars since then, and sports cars. But I mean, so there was a tradition of hill climbers going on to be really good circuit racers, but that tradition has kind of gone by the wayside over the last few years. So you're following kind of an old tradition that needs to be rekindled, aren't you, a bit?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, as you rightly say, I mean, and going further back, in the sort of 60s and the 70s, drivers like Graham Hill and Joe Siffert and people like that would do quite a lot of these big hill climbs in Europe, in between Grand Prix and things like that. I mean, I think back in the day, drivers used to be a lot more diverse in the range of events that they competed in. As you rightly say, Andy Prio is the really the most current hill climber who's gone on to really forge a major career in circuit racing, and something of a huge inspiration and role model for me to look up to. I actually met him last year, and we spoke all about his career path and the trajectory that I'm trying to follow. I've actually got he signed something for me, which I'm actually stood in front of at the moment, which says "Good luck at Le Mans, best wishes, Andy Prio," which is pretty cool. He's really one of very few, I guess, in modern times. So it's to go from hill climb to endurance racing. You're literally, you're at the two extremes of racing, really. I suppose hill climb being over in a number of minutes, and an endurance race that can last for potentially 24 hours. So you couldn't have two more diametrically opposed forms of motorsport in that respect.
Absolutely not. And we've got two people on the call who. But by the way, if you're hearing line noise on the podcast, apologies. It's one of the vagaries of Skype. You do occasionally get those, but we do try our best to keep it to a minimum. So apologies if you are hearing that. But anyway,
sorry. Yeah, I'm not moving around, so hopefully it's not me.
I think it's one of those things. No problem at all. So we have got two people who are aware and have been involved in the club racing scene. So we'll bring you in a moment, guys. But before we do, Charlie, tell us a bit about why we actually got talking in the first place. So you're taking part in, I think it's the Michelin Le Mans Cup, or you'd like to.
So I'm racing in the Michelin Le Mans Cup this season. I'm working towards a 3-year goal to compete at the Le Mans 24 Hours of Le Mans. So that has long been my absolute dream. It's, I would say, pretty much about the biggest race on earth. And I think I've been there three times as a spectator. And I just remember, the first time I went, I was completely in awe. It was just such an incredible spectacle and event to be there at. I thought, wow, if ever I could choose a race to do, this would be it. So now the ACO, the Automobile Club de l'Ouest, who are the governing body for Le Mans circuit and a lot of the championships built around that. They have quite a good pathway that's developed now, which is really the Michelin Le Mans Cup and then the European Le Mans Series. So it's the Michelin Le Mans Cup is one of the it's the only championship that goes to the 24 Hours of Le Mans and competes on the circuit there. So for anyone who's not familiar with it, the 24 Hours of Le Mans is ran once a year on a circuit 8.5 miles long, which is constructed just for one race in the year. That's the only time this full circuit exists, and it's made up of public roads and crazy fast circuit. They've put a couple of chicanes in the last sort of 20 years or something, but back in the 60s it was just one long straight down the Mulsanne, and the cars were hitting 240 miles an hour. So you can imagine it's a pretty incredible place to go and compete at. So I'm due to race there. It's my third race of the season this year. We do 2 races in front of hundreds of thousands of spectators and a global audience of millions of people. And the second race is actually on Saturday morning, right before the start of the 24 hours. So it's a huge moment in my career, the highlight so far, to be able to race at that circuit in front of such a huge global audience, and I'm really very excited about it.
Brilliant. I'm reading a quote here online that you said, I am. Now I'm living proof that these barriers can be broken down. I want to use my visibility within sport to ensure no one ever has to grow up feeling this way. We should all be free to be who we want to be in life and sport. So it's really the perfect time to talk representation, and I know that we've got questions about that and also about your Le Mans ambitions. So I'll just throw it out to Sophie and Conrad. So Sophie, what questions do you have? What would you like to know about?
Just going on the line of the LGBT representation in motorsport, I myself have worked with an LGBT driver, but how would you feel that we could improve LGBT representation in motorsport?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of crossovers between other sports as well, and I think one of the really so one example you could look to is the Rainbow Laces campaign, which was run by Stonewall and Team Pride. Team Pride partners. Team Pride are a collective of about 8 or 10 companies at present, like Aon and Adidas and Aviva, I think, and ASOS are the most recent people to join. So the Rainbow Laces is a fantastic campaign in that. This is a very simple idea, and it's really everybody wearing rainbow laces in their sports shoes, their trainers, their football boots, whatever. And the great thing about that is that it's showing support from allies. And I think for anyone who identifies as LGBT, my own experience, especially in motorsport, is that when you can't see any visibility, when you have no idea of how you're going to be treated. You don't know if you're going to be accepted. You don't know how people are going to react to you. And when you can see very visible signs that, and that might be that there are other competitors or people working in the sport who are openly identifying as LGBT, but also from people who are allies, people who are united in their support of the community and are happy to wear rainbow laces in their trainers, which is just a really way of saying, I support you, and I won't tolerate any abuse or any form of discrimination. Sends out a very clear message. So I think if we had, obviously that's limited to sports, for example, where people wear shoes. Rainbow laces doesn't work in swimming, for things like that. But I think things that enable people to demonstrate clearly that the support is there. I think something like that would work very well in motorsport.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah.
I'm very proud to wear the rainbow laces in my race boots. I've not seen anybody else with a set in. Maybe it's something that needs to be pushed more in motorsport. I guess really that's where I'm trying to put a lot of my energy. A lot of my energy goes into driving and performing as best I can, but a lot of my energy goes into the activism that I'm trying to do and trying to move things forward. Really,
there is an element within motorsport still, and I think it's always been there, but it's been described as hyper masculine. So you get people. For example, we had a recent scandal where John Watson came out against Lewis Hamilton missing media duties because he was upset about Niki Lauda, and and it kind of fits into people's conception of what you might call toxic masculinity. Would you say that that's going to be something that's possible to get rid of within motorsport, or should we be aiming to get rid of it?
I think. As you clearly say, motorsport is a very testosterone-fueled, masculine environment. I think, hopefully society is moving in a direction that people, and this is open. This affects us in so many areas of life generally. People can be more open about their feelings. We just had mental health awareness month, which is another fantastic campaign to get people to just be more open about their feelings, their problems, and help take stigma away from being able to be open when people are struggling. I think something like 3 in 4 people will suffer from depression in their life. It's something that affects us all, and I think whether we're talking about our personal lives or our professional careers or in our sport, I think being able to just be open about our feelings is really important. I think athletes can set a strong example, and often when people, I'm sure we've seen this time and time again, when you see an athlete who's really bearing their full soul and shows their emotions, and that's when we really connect with people. I think wearing, I don't know, I suppose as you go into sports, people have commercial sponsors, and there's all kinds of things that come into it, but I think fundamentally if people can just be people, we're all human, and we should all be able to express ourselves within our sport. So yeah, I think there's probably scope for motorsport to take some lessons there. I don't know. Motorsport to me, it always felt like a huge family. I think it's one of the many things that I love about motorsport. There's incredible support there. It's a big question to try and answer, I guess.
Well, yeah, of course. Certainly motorsport has helped a lot of people, including me, through difficult times, and particularly motorsport social media. It does have its toxic elements, but it also has its wonderful elements, and it's good to be in touch with them. Conrad, what are your thoughts? What would you like to talk about?
One thing that I'm interested to ask is about the journey to endurance racing, and once you get there. Because one thing that I've noticed about the path to endurance racing, and once you actually reach that spectrum of racing compared to open wheel, it seems a lot more diverse. There's a lot of different, you have the well-trodden path when you get to Formula 1 or other open wheel motorsports like IndyCar, and it's generally you come from Indy Lights or Formula 2. When you get to endurance racing, you can come from those series, you can come from American racing, you can come from British touring cars. It seems a lot more diverse. It seems that a lot more people within there are open, and I'm just wondering, does that reflect in the personalities of the people that are there, because it's such a diverse age range and diverse way of getting there, that they're probably more open to societal issues and issues facing LGBT?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, potentially. You're right in saying that there is perhaps more of a diverse spread of ages, characters. One of the things obviously that's particular to endurance racing is the driver grading system, which for anyone who's not familiar with that ranges from bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And so your bronze drivers, all the teams have to carry a bronze driver, for example. And your bronze driver classification tends to be someone who's perhaps, say, someone who maybe doesn't earn their living from motorsport. So it might be somebody who's, like a business owner, or someone who, can still compete at a very, very high level, but isn't, say, somebody like a factory driver, for example. So that brings a really interesting mix of like you say, of characters and people from all walks of life into the sports. I think, as you say again, age-wise, I suppose if you're looking at single-seater racing, Formula One certainly, and I'm not so sure in IndyCar because I'm not really as familiar with that series, but I guess into your kind of 40s, really, that's perhaps your cut-off for most drivers into a professional career. But whereas Jan Lammers, for example, who's had a fantastic sports car career, still racing. I think Jan Lammers is in his 60s now, and competing in LMP2, which is just gives you a kind of an idea of the spread of ages. Then at the other end of the scale, you've got people like Nick de Vries, who's I guess in his early 20s. So it's I think that, and that, having that mix of people, it's perhaps more of an open environment. I mean, I've just my experience in the Michelin Le Mans Cup this year. It's a great atmosphere in the paddock. I've met some really interesting characters. It's a really friendly championship, and for me, with my personal story coming into, I'm very confident these days. I don't really get, I'm pretty happy walking into those kinds of environments. But nonetheless, sometimes when you don't know anyone and you're new to a championship, it can be a bit intimidating. And I found this year that a lot of people who've just been very, very warm and friendly and open, both from the organisation, from the manufacturer that we're working with, Norma, and just other competitors. So it's great to see. So maybe you're right there, Conrad. It's a good observation.
So obviously, if you watch any form of motorsport, you've probably heard of Le Mans. It's one of those races that is so prestigious and so incredible to watch, and is always so full of action. But what was it that drew you to wanting to race in it? What was the main appeal?
The first time I ever went to Le Mans was 2001, and I was about 19 years old. Obviously, this is before, a long way before transition. So I was there with my eldest brother, Alistair, and we were in a really, really bad tent from sort of, I don't know, Boy Scouts circa 1970 or something. And I think it was the wettest year on record. I mean, it rained and it rained and it dried out. As soon as it dried out, it rained again. And this just process repeated itself the entire week. And it was an endurance race, I think, for the spectators as much as it was for the drivers in many respects, because it was, we walked, I've no idea how far we walked, but a lot of walking, getting baked, drenched, cold, wet. But, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I think seeing what the teams go through, and how the teams have to work together in endurance racing is something that I find fascinating. Obviously, in any sport, your team is critical to you and how you perform. But whereas in, say, single-seater racing, when, the driver leaves the pits, generally, they start the race. It's over to them. They're on their own. In endurance racing, the team works as a very tight unit for the entire duration of that race. If that's 24 hours, it's whoever's working out the strategy. It's every time the car comes in for a pit stop, or there's damage, or the way the mechanics and the engineers and the strategists and everybody has to function as one seamless unit. It's a really unique thing to see, and I think it really captured my imagination, and just the whole romance of Le Mans. it's a name that everybody's heard of, and you just, throughout history, it goes back such a long way. I came away from that race kind of spellbound, really. It left a huge impression on me, and just seeing the cars as well. I mean, sports cars for me just really do it. The prototypes. There's something about that look. I think maybe it's because when I was very young, my earliest ambition was to be a fighter pilot, and unfortunately, I'm terrible at maths, so that was kind of kiboshed around the age of about 11. But there's something about the sports cars. Maybe it's it's the kind of closest thing to a fighter plane in a car format. I don't know. It just gets my heart racing thinking about it.
I've got to ask this: do you have to be good at maths to be a fighter pilot?
Well, my understanding is that you needed maths and physics up to A level, certainly, and A grade. So that wasn't on the cards for me, put it that way. So right. I know a few fighter pilots, and I'm pretty sure maths and physics are pretty much a requisite because of the calculations that you have to be able to do in your head whilst doing 5 other things simultaneously. So sadly, I need a strategist, a team strategy person on the end of the radio to tell me what to do. That's not really my forte.
Yeah, but you've had some pretty fantastic results this season, haven't you? I mean, tell us a bit about how you've been doing and where you've come so far.
Thank you. Had a fantastic start to the season, really, with qualifying us in 4th place at Paul Ricard for race 1. It was a bit of a baptism of fire for me, because it's only the second time I've driven in an endurance race, and the long and short of it is we placed 4th in the end. So we started in 4th, we finished 4th, which was obviously one step away from the podium, and a fantastic result. I've got to say full credit to Racing Experience, the team that I'm driving with, because they've just been amazing. Such an efficient team, and they've worked their socks off. We've had fantastic support from Norma Automotive, who built the car that we race. The car only arrived 6 weeks before our first race, so we were quite limited in terms of the amount of testing that we could do. So all things considered, we were off to a really good start, and we're just hoping to build on that going forwards. Unfortunately, Monza, the second race, wasn't our race weekend. Sometimes you do everything you can, and life just keeps throwing curveballs at you, and there's only so many you can field, really. And Monza was one of those weekends where we showed our potential, but we just had some bad luck, some accident damage, and unfortunately a mechanical failure that hit us midway through the race. But all the ingredients are there. I've got 2 fantastic drivers that I'm sharing the car with this year, David and Gary Hauser, who are both brothers. And we're confident about what we can do. I mean, it's our first year in this championship. So you always come into something like that, you've got to be realistic about your aims. But nonetheless, I think we've had a good start, and we hope to continue, and that podium's calling.
Yeah, and Conrad, I'll throw it to you in a moment, but 2 things. That car looks absolutely fantastic. It does look genuinely like a sort of scaled down LMP1, really. And the other thing is, you've obviously run into a funding issue you weren't expecting for the Michelin Le Mans Cup this season. I'm sure you don't want to go into detail about sponsors who've pulled out and all that kind of stuff, but it's a frustrating thing that occasionally does happen in motor racing. But essentially, what are you looking for, and how can we get it for you?
Yeah, as you say, motor racing is a very tough sport, because drivers are dependent on a lot of the time on the partnerships that we have, and so right now I'm looking first and foremost for commercial partners who really strongly identify with my story. I think there's a really inspiring story there, in terms of where I've come from, where I've got to and where I'm going to in motorsport. And I think really it's a unique story right now, and I'm very passionate about trying to help people through my profile within the sport and inspire change. So right now I'm working hard, very, very hard on a crowdfunding campaign. I need to raise £50,000 in order to make the grid for the race at Le Mans in just over 2 weeks. So it's not a situation any driver wants to be in, but unfortunately it's just I am where I am right now. And when I look at the amount of exposure my story's had in the media, the support that's been there, it's been incredible to see. And I'm just, it's. I'm sure that with the way things are going, that support is only going to continue growing and growing. So I'm just working hard to try and keep things moving towards Le Mans, really, because it's the big race that everyone wants to be at. So,
all right, Conrad.
Yeah, one thing that I am interested to ask, because this is kind of my thing, is about media representation and more around the pressure that media and sponsor involvement can put on drivers within the sport and teams to follow a certain narrative and a certain line. My opinion of it is that it's quite archaic at this point in time and they need to do better, but would you be able to give a greater insight into that kind of pressure and whether it needs to be broken through to whatever extent?
I mean, the first thing I would say that in terms of the the sponsors I currently work with, NGK Spark Plugs, Tech Tree, Liquid Colour Design, and who paint my helmets, Schroth Indie, those companies are all stand shoulder to shoulder with me in terms of who I am as a both as a driver and in terms of my personal story. So I'm very proud to be working with them, and to me, I want to work with companies who identify with my story and what that says about me as an individual, and fundamentally what that says about them as a company. That ultimately we should all be free to be who we want to be in our life. That diversity and inclusion are things that make us stronger as a society. And so really, it's. I mean, I've never been in a situation, Conrad, where, say, for example, you might have worked with stories you might hear where an athlete works with a sponsor who then drops them because of their personal life or something. That's but sure. I'm sure we've all come across stories about athletes from various different types of sports where that might have happened in the past. I'd like to think we're living at a point in history where that's not something that's going to happen anymore. But it's difficult. It's difficult for anyone to find sponsorship, and I guess sometimes speaking from my own perspective, when I came back to compete in England last year, and I came out as trans in quite a big way for Trans Day of Visibility in March 2018, it really felt like a bit of a leap of faith for me, because let's be honest, there's no trans drivers competing in at a professional level in motorsport, and I didn't know. You don't. If you're going to be that person who's going to be the first, it is a leap of faith, because you don't know if you're suddenly going to be struggling even more to find sponsorship. Personally, I feel that it's the thing that makes me unique, and there's a lot of strength to draw from that. So I'd hope that there are companies that would really identify with that story and want to be a part of it. But it's it did feel like a big risk to me, it's I think the thing is, we just, the more people who feel comfortable to be themselves, then that can only be a good thing. And I think it's really about creating inclusive environments and cultures where people know that they're going to be supported. In the last 12 months, I know a couple of people from motorsport who've come out as trans or as gay, and who've messaged me and said, thank you for doing what you've done, because now, that's encouraged me, that's inspired me to come out myself and to live authentically, and that, to me, it's not about me bigging myself up, it's not about an ego trip, it's just, thankfully, knowing that doing what I'm doing can have an impact, and even if that reaches a couple of people, then that's helping them change their life. And that, to me, is what this is about. It's about people feeling able to be themselves. It's a simple thing. We all want to be, we want to be happy in our life, and we should all have that right. And that's the same in sport. So yeah.
When you did come out as trans, did you find that there was a kind of support group available to you just to speak to and bounce ideas off, or was it a case of you had to find your own support, maybe get involved in doing that yourself? So I guess what I'm asking is does motorsport provide those avenues, not just for people who come out as gay or trans, but also for people who have any kind of change in their life, or is it something that they have to do themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I remember. The honest answer is I'm not too sure. I mean, not to say that there are or there aren't support networks out there but I suppose I just didn't. I didn't necessarily look for them. I guess the thing is, for me as well, because by March 2018, I'd been living as my true self for 6 years or something. So I felt pretty strong at that point in my life to be able to just say, well, okay, I've made the decision. I'm going to come out in motorsport. Here I am, everyone. This is me. This is my story. I spoke to Danny Watts around the time that he came out. And that was an amazing feeling, just to connect with somebody who who has raced at his level, who's 2-time class winner in LMP2 at Le Mans, somebody that I really look up to, and just to share, just to connect and speak and hear each other's stories. I mean, it's a simple thing, but I think, when you can connect with somebody and talk in that way and be very open together, it's a unique experience, because I think I guess it's like, I've got trans friends, and nobody, in the nicest possible way, that I know people, we've all had support from various people in our lives, and I'm very grateful for that. But I don't think, unless you've ever been through the actual experience yourself and you've lived through that, you can never fully appreciate what that's like. And I think it's when you connect with people who've shared that same experience, there's a special bond that you have.
Yeah, I remember Danny Watts being an incredibly quick Formula Renault driver as well. So he's had a long career in the sport. So a good person to speak to, no doubt.
Yeah, and he gave me some great advice as well. So well, I mean, it was really around the time that I was looking to transfer from hill climb into circuit racing, and that was a very daunting thing for me. It's something I'd wanted to do, but again, it was something that was based on budget, in terms of what series I'd be able to afford, what was going to give me the most seat time, what was going to give me the best experience. So Danny gave me some really good advice with that, in terms of, I guess I had aspirations of the kind of car that the kind of series that I wanted to race in, and Danny said, well, you'd be better off, you should look at Formula Ford, or something like Ginetta GT5, which is what I did, which was going to give me a lot of experience and seat time, as opposed to, say, a more expensive championship, which was going to come with higher costs and potentially limit the amount of racing I could do. So he was a great person to talk to at that point in time.
Yeah, and actually you might just have entered sports cars at exactly the right time, because it looks as though in 2020 the FIA is going to go towards these hypercar regs, which will hopefully feed down to an even cheaper LMP2 and LMP3 category as well. So do you think possibly if you can hang on in there with the Michelin Le Mans Cup this season, that you might be in a really good position next season?
I'd certainly hope so. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm sure whatever happens, I'm going to find a way. I mean, racing is my life, and I put my absolute heart and soul into it. And when you, I can't kind of look at a situation and think, well, there's always got to be a way to make things work. The hypercar regs are really interesting. It's going to be, it's going to be fascinating to see how that all comes together, and looking at the long-term vision for that, and where endurance racing is going to go. I mean, I've got aspirations beyond the 24 hours of Le Mans, and where I'd like to see my career progress, certainly. So, I'm in it for the long haul, and to me, this is again, in terms of the partnerships I'm trying to build, I'm looking 2 to 3 years for partners, to really, people who want to come on that journey. I mean, there's so much we're doing. We're working on a documentary. There's all kinds of things happening in the background, and for people to come and be part of that, I think it's a great story to be able to offer people. So
of course. Yeah.
Your experience in Ginetta racing cars is one that I'd quite like to get into, because one thing that I've noticed growing up is that we've had mainstays in British sport, and within British motorsport, a lot of those have centred around teams such as Lotus. They managed to branch off in a lot of different areas, and you could say to an extent BRM and other kinds. Is Ginetta like a modern day version of that, a staple of motorsport within this country, where a lot of people feel confident in the fact that they will have a great platform behind them that will be able to take them further and further onwards? Does it feel like one of the more professional organisations in that kind of area of motorsport?
I think, racing in Ginetta was a great, it was a great series. I learnt a lot, and I think as a constructor, I mean, they offer huge progression. If you just look at the range of cars that they build and the series that you can race them with them, right away from the the Ginetta G40 Juniors, up through the various iterations of the G40, up to GT5, like I was doing, then the G55 in GT4, whether you want to do Super Cup or you want to run that in British GT. You then got the LMP3 car, their G57, and right the way up now to the LMP1 program. I can't really think there are many manufacturers that spring to mind that offer such a diversity and so many stepping stones through their whole product range, and to be able to offer that with manufacturer-backed championships is a huge thing. So I think Ginetta are great, have achieved great things in terms of Lawrence Tomlinson's vision for what he's doing with the company. And certainly just my experience last year was GT5 was a really fierce championship to race in, and it's nice that we were on a good package supporting British GT Championship, a few of the BTCC rounds, and then obviously going off to Spa for one round abroad. I'd recommend it to anyone. I mean, coming from Hill Climb, looking for a series where, I'm confident in being able to drive a car fast on a lap, but when you're throwing in sort of traffic and circuit skills and all kinds of things for the first time. It was really about, for me last year, it was about picking a series that was going to give me the best opportunity to learn learn all those things. And GT5 coming 4 abreast into a corner, it's those are the kind of situations you find yourself in at times, and it's when you learn, I suppose. So you have to learn quite fast, but I think great example of a British company doing great things.
I wonder actually what the strategy is with Ginetta's LMP1, because it looks beautiful, but like there's only going to be another year, maximum 2 years of LMP1, isn't there?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to ask Ginetta that, I suppose. I mean, yeah. I'm not too sure what their kind of plan is in the immediate future. If they're going to be developing their own hypercar, looking at the new regs, or quite what.
Well, you better make sure you get a test in the LMP1 while it's still active, I guess.
I'm available for drives.
All right. Speaking of which, I mean, looking kind of around the motorsport world. I mean, obviously you're kind of laser focused on sports cars right now, on endurance racing. But are there any other series that would also take your fancy that you're tempted to have a go in?
Yeah. I mean, I when I was at Spa with Ginetta last year, my teammate and driver coach we were working with at the time, Alex Toth-Jones and Mike Epps, we took a little trip to the Nürburgring, being it was only an hour and a half away, and drove a couple of laps. And I think all three of us came away feeling like we'd just done the best, worst thing, because we were all just like, oh, I've got to race here someday. I mean, I think that track is so it's legendary, isn't it? And so if I could, so definitely like the VLN series is something I'd love to go and do some racing, and like 24 hours, Nürburgring 24 hours is really bit of a bucket list thing, and obviously no LMP cars in that category, so it'd be interesting to try and fit something like that into a program at some point. The other one, of course, is really just is Pikes Peak. Having my roots firmly in hill climb, it's really the king of the hills for everybody, I think. And having been there in 2017 and actually seen the race up close, it just made me want to do it even more, really. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and of course the Pikes Peak record, I believe, currently held by the Volkswagen fully electric hill climb car as well.
Which is about to take on the Nürburgring as well, isn't it? So fairly imminently, really? I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
they're going to be taking it around. It'll be very interesting to see what kind of time they can do in it. So I mean, obviously, electric cars just take over at that event, I think, in terms of, I mean, when you go there, and I think we were at the Devil's Playground, which is up at something like 11,000 feet, and to get there and spectate, you have to get up there really early in the morning. I mean, you're talking like 3 o'clock in the morning early, so you pretty much spend the night up there, and when you're walking around, you feel dizzy, you feel a bit faint, you feel a bit odd. So you can imagine what that does to an engine in terms of the power losses. So I mean, electric cars are clearly that's one race where they've really come into their own.
Oh, definitely, and I mean, obviously, safety there has taken a big turn for the better in the last few years. But some of the corners and some of the kind of sheer ravines that you have to drive past to get to the top. I mean, it's the kind of place where instant torque can make all the difference, I would imagine. So the question I was going to ask was, have you ever driven, and would you like to drive a fully electric race car?
I'd be interested to try one. I mean, I think the only electric car I've driven is a golf buggy, so I know that was quite fun. I mean, I think I'd be open to if somebody offered me a go in an electric car, it'd be fascinating. I do obviously love the LMP3 car. It's such a beast of a car. That 5-litre V8. I can imagine it would be very a very eerie thing, driving a car that doesn't make a noise. It's not something I've ever really experienced, but yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll put the word out there. I'm not sure how many Formula E team owners listen to this, but let's just see if any of the teams pick up on that. That would be really cool if someone did.
I'm tempted to throw a bit of a curveball in here because we've been talking about electric racing, but one thing that I've noticed is more popular in the endurance side of things that hasn't even begun to reach into open wheel is hydrogen power.
Yeah, I thought you were about to say that. Yeah, I mean, they ran the is it the H24 concept last year, was it?
Aston Martin did it, I believe. That might have been 2018 or before then, but I'm pretty sure they did an Aston Martin Rapide that was hydrogen powered.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I think they actually ran at did it run at, was it Spa or one of the big circuits? They ran and it was like an LMP car with a sort of hydrogen power unit, which I think they're aiming to have running at Le Mans in the experimental class by 2022 or 2020. I mean, yeah, it's not technology that I know much about, but I think it's going to be interesting to follow the development. I guess that's one of the great things about the Spirit of Le Mans. I think the championship has a long history of trying to invite and encourage the development of experimental cars to like obviously the Delta Wing, which was quite a unique car that I'm sure a lot of people will remember. And so, yeah, I think, it's great to encourage innovation in design, and to do that through motorsport is, I think it's a good thing to see, really.
Bringing back great memories by mentioning that Delta Wing. I remember that it was one of the 3 draft proposals entered for the IndyCar, which would have been fantastic. But in the end, Nissan picked it up. It became a Le Mans car, which was good in itself. But it would just be good to see more different concepts in motorsport in general. I feel like. And I mean, Formula E is not a spec series, and I've defended Formula E in many arguments where people have said it is, but it is a series where all the cars look the same outwardly. So it would be good to have a series where people can keep answering design challenges in that way, wouldn't it? So, I mean, it would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, when this takes me back to hill climb, to be honest. Hill climb in the UK, certainly. Whilst I don't think anyone's built an electric car for UK hill climb. Please feel free, anyone, to correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the great things about that series was, certainly in terms of the freedom of design, and people came up with some really wacky stuff, in terms of the single seaters and the aero packages that people were pushing. And even down to like powertrain and stuff. There's a lot of innovation in hill climb, and you'll often find people who are like current or ex Formula One designers. Willem Toet, who was obviously from Sauber, who actually raced a Peugeot 205, which was quite a famous little car on the circuit, which is an incredibly fast car. It had all kinds of traction control and sensors and some crazy technology on that. So it's a series that actually does see quite a bit of innovation. I mean, there's a really a few videos of this car on YouTube. A guy called Nick Mann who made this car that was like if you imagine you got a Caterham and you put massive wings on it, and then he canted the engine over, so the engine was pretty much lying flat on its side, turboed it, ran 4-wheel drive, and then he used an auxiliary power unit from a helicopter turbine engine. So basically this thing ran at something like 40,000 RPM and sent constant boost pressure to the turbo. So the turbo never had any lag. Regardless of revs, the turbo was always spinning at at top RPM. And then I think at some point he even had he said he got so much extra boost on it that he diverted a lot of the boost into a blown diffuser out the back of the car. And look this thing up, it's called the Manic BT. And Nick Mann, and Mann is spelt double N. But you start this thing up and it sounds like a jet engine. But yeah, I mean, the engineering that went into that, and this guy, built it pretty much entirely on his own. When you look at some of the talent and the innovation and the ideas that we have in this country in motorsport, it would be an amazing thing to see that all just channeled into some kind of crazy series that just allowed a.
And what would be your message to a young trans person who feels like you felt that there is no one else like them in the world? What would you say to encourage them?
I would say don't feel alone, because I grew up feeling alone, and actually when I started transition and the people that I've met since, and the people that I've been able to connect with, and the friendships that I formed, just made me wish I'd done it a long time ago, because there are so many people that feel the same way as you, and you can now, we live in a time, where the internet and social media connects us to people very easily, and there's some fantastic support out there. And if anyone wants to access that, I mean, I reached out to a lot of people through my YouTube channel, which was connected me to an amazing community that opened so many doors. And so just don't be afraid, don't doubt yourself, just be true to yourself, be who you want to be in life. And society is gradually changing, and it's society that has the problem, it's not you. You're amazing.
Yeah. Well, pleasure to speak to you. Charlie Martin, nice person, bloody quick racing driver, and is going to take Le Mans by storm if she can raise that £50,000. So, get onto her Just Giving page, and you can follow her on Twitter on, I think it's @GoCharlieM, is that right?
Yeah, that's me, GoCharlieM, which is my Twitter and Instagram account, or if you want to Google me, literally just Go Charlie. That's what you're going to find. So,
super.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, guys. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to listen as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So, from Charlie Martin, Conrad O'Keefe, Sophie Barker, and myself, Stuart Garlick, this has been the E-Talking Podcast. We're available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all those good places. Thank you very much. Good night.